Healthcare costs are the #1 cause of bankruptcy in our country. Our equation is, what's the least profit that we can make while still being able to run a business? In December of '07, I couldn't get a job. I lifted a heavy piece of oil pipe the wrong way and hemorrhaged several of my lower vertebrae. I was so tired. I had very little libido, stamina. I was depressed. Let's find out why. So took some blood and determined I had the testosterone level of an 80-year-old man. My life changed practically overnight. Most doctors are not trained in medical school how to do preventative health. And I was just so lucky to find one of the greatest doctors in the world to manufacture and create and compound these drugs that are made just for me.
How did you develop that from an idea into the business we see today?
Before Big Pharma existed, all drugs were compounded.
Okay.
We can take existing molecules that have been FDA approved, customize them for what the doctor thinks is in the best interest of his or her patients. My ambition was to be able to expand access to these medications to as many patients like myself, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. At a fraction of the cost, the day that you get access to these therapies, that is one of the luckiest days in our lives. Big Pharma, in my opinion, has failed miserably. Manufacturer, wholesaler, pharmacy, PBM, insurance carrier, all these middlemen added so much cost, and the cost goes up by about 10% a year. That doesn't really benefit patients. That's not really innovation.
You described CEOs as corporate athletes.
We can make ourselves similar to high-performance athletes. We can be LeBron James. Do you want to be like 95% of the population, or do you want to be that top 5%?
So Shaun, let's start with your personal journey. Take us from, I guess, your earlier formative years and up to the point where you felt inspired to launch Empower Pharmacy.
Yeah, so, I've always been a tinkerer, and I think I had the knack at a very young age to become an engineer. Growing up on my father's racetrack, he was an entrepreneur as well, and he came from Iran right before the revolution. And so he put me to work at a very young age, working that racetrack, riding go-karts, fixing the go-karts, doing vending machines, restocking the pool table, and everything that goes on inside of an entertainment center. So it was a great experience to learn from a fellow entrepreneur, how to do business. And of course, growing up on a go-kart track, you fall in love with cars at a very young age, like most kids do. And when I turned of age to be able to go to college, I determined I wanted to be an automotive engineer. And I was very lucky to go to UT Austin. They have a great automotive engineering program. And when I graduated in December of '07, I couldn't get a job working for any of the car companies as they were going through difficult times. And I ended up working for an oil field company, doing hydraulic fracturing as a field engineer. And about 9 months in the job, when I was rigging up with my crew, I lifted a heavy piece of oil pipe the wrong way and hemorrhaged several of my lower vertebrae. And so I couldn't work out in the fields anymore. I was went to physical therapy. And it was really the first time I'd seen a doctor since I was a kid. And that doctor looked me up and down and noticed that I was very skinny for my age. I'm 5'10" back then. I weighed 125 pounds. And I was 25 years old. And I never really, thought anything about it. I thought I was just an endomorph. I was just a long, lanky, skinny kid. There's nothing I could ever do, no matter how much I ate or how much I worked out. I just couldn't gain any weight whatsoever. Well, that doctor looked at me and said, "Yeah, you're very skinny for your age. Let's find out why." So took some blood and determined I had the testosterone level of an 80-year-old man, and kind of explained a lot. Explained why I was so tired my entire life, why I had to take a nap at 5 p.m. It was very difficult. I didn't get good sleep, and I had very little libido, stamina. I was depressed. And these are all the same symptoms of low testosterone. And so that doctor, he sent me to a specialist in Houston, where I'm from. It just so happens to be Houston happens to have the largest medical center in the entire world, which means it has some of the greatest doctors in the entire world. And I was just so lucky to find one of the greatest doctors in the world that deals with situations like this. And that doctor was so wise. One of the reasons he was one of the greatest is because he understood that his patients could be better served by personalizing their medicine, and also that his patients would need to be on these therapies for the rest of our lives. And for my case, that would be, at least 50 years. For the rest of his patients, between 20 and 40 years. And, if he was to send his patients to a traditional pharmacy, which utilizes the traditional pharmaceutical supply chain of manufacturer, wholesaler, pharmacy, PBM, insurance carrier, like all these middlemen added so much cost, and the cost goes up by about 10% a year. And so he realized his patients, a vast majority of his patient population, would become non-compliant with their therapies at some point in their lives. But if he was to send his patients to a compounding pharmacy, those costs actually go down over time. And so his patients would never lose access, assuming that their income would be the same throughout their life or increase. And so he sent me to that compounding pharmacy. And that was my real first experience with a pharmacy on my own. And it was amazing. It was like, wow, you have pharmacists and pharmacy technicians working together to manufacture and create and compound these drugs that are made just for me and are at a fraction of the cost that it would have cost me if I was to use the traditional healthcare system. And of course, when I got on that medications, oh my God, it completely changed my life. I became normal for the first time in my entire life. And because it turns out I was born with a pituitary disorder. I don't create the chemicals that tell my body to produce testosterone. And when I got those chemicals, my life changed practically overnight. I gained 15 pounds of muscle without even working out.
Really?
It's like that was the missing link.
Yeah.
No matter how much I took weightlifting 1, weightlifting 2, weightlifting 3 in college, nothing. But then I just take this medication and boom, I get all the muscle I could ever wanted for. I should have had in the first place. And then I got my libido back. My depression went away. I got more endurance, stamina, and of course, ambition. And my ambition at that point was, to build cars. Now, my ambition was to be able to expand access to these medications to as many patients like myself so they can be as lucky as I've been by being introduced to these wonderful chemicals. And ever since then, we've been working to build our pharmacy so that we can serve an exponential growing patient population that's becoming aware of how important their health is to their performance and their quality of life. And at the same time, creating new concoctions, new formulations that may better serve a patient than what's commercially available out in the market. All at the same time, utilizing automation and building in an efficient system to be able to make, dispense, and distribute drugs directly to every single pharmaceutical end user in the entire country at a fraction of the cost and a much better touch point and service point than the traditional healthcare system is able to offer patients in this country. It's still just the beginning. There's so many patients in this country that are completely unaware of compounding, as compounding only makes up 3% of the total addressable market for drugs dispensed in this country. The other 97% is big pharma. And big pharma, in my opinion, has failed miserably in to be able to expand access to patients, affordable access especially, as healthcare costs are the number one cause of bankruptcy in our country. And so something needs to change. And hopefully we'll be able to play a small role in improving access to these life-changing medications so patients like myself and millions other can live healthier, happier, more productive lives.
Yeah. Well, play a big role, possibly. As I understand it, Empower Pharmacy is now the largest compounding chemist in the States, right?
That's right.
Being founded 15 years ago.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, and we're only 3% of that 3% of the total addressable market. So there's a long ways to go to give patients access to the highest quality medications possible at the lowest cost possible. And so we see this as the beginnings of a new generics market.
If we can go all the way back to when you had that first consultation with the doctor you spoke about, my understanding is that doctor was probably a bit of a standout in terms of the approach that he or she took. Is there something inside you that feels maybe a bit lucky that you met that person? Is that feeding that drive you have to deliver? Oh,
absolutely. I'm very lucky to be in the position that I'm in. And when I think about it, I wouldn't be able to, if I was born in my father's country, my mother's country, would not have the opportunities I have today. And if they hadn't have moved to Houston, which just happens to be, one of the largest cities in the country and had the largest medical center in the world, like that's pure luck too. And if I hadn't had such a great father and such a great mother, a father that taught me entrepreneurship and a mother who's a nurse, teach me how to take care of others. And, at the same time, my spouse, she just happens to be a pharmacist. We met 23 years ago, like before I even thought about pharmacy. That's pure luck too. And at the same time, meeting that doctor and meeting such amazing people that also want to make a significant difference in the lives of others. I mean, I realize how lucky I am. So it's my duty in life now is to spread that luck to as many patients as possible so they can be lucky for themselves and be lucky for others.
Amazing. How did you take Empower from this idea? You'd seen it work for you and you'd seen the need for this. How did you develop that from an idea into the business we see today?
I think I was very lucky not to have any experience with the traditional healthcare system. I came at this business with first principles. Like, what are we doing? What are we trying to solve? Well, at the end of the day, we're just trying to make medicine and get in the hands of patients with good service, good quality, and good cost. That's it. Like, let's just focus on those primary factors and forever iterate on making each one of those better over time. And so we go from, 150 square foot space where I'm working as a pharmacy technician alongside a pharmacist and trying to figure out, like, what does the patient want? Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. It's not about what the middlemen want. It's about what's in the patient's best interest, first and foremost. And then designing a system and putting in automation and putting in procedures to better serve that patient over time. And so of course, expanding our formulary, getting other areas of treatment. So we started with just men's health because those are the drugs that I was interested in. Those are the drugs that I was introduced to. And from that, we realized, there's this other subset of the population called women. and they need health too. They have their own issues as well, very similar to what we have. We both have hormone disorders. We both have sexual dysfunction, and so we started expanding our formulary into women's health. And it turns out, men and women also have issues with obesity. So we started expanding into obesity and creating formulas that weren't commercially available that may improve a patient outcome compared to the limited amount of drugs that have been FDA approved in this country. And then from there, going off into other areas of treatment that are coincide with health, like IV nutrition, dermatology, mental health, longevity medicine, and bringing them all together into what we call functional medicine or integrative health, and offering that one-stop shop for that patient or provider to be able to access all the medications they will ever need to improve their quality of life and improve their performance.
You talked before about big pharma. Is it fair to say that the way that they sort of tackle the development of drugs is they find a problem that affects lots of people and they try to deal with that problem, and then that solution is what's then given to all the different individuals? Whereas you guys are taking it from let's look at the individual and then solve. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, big pharma, they're mostly there to produce new drugs. Like, that's really what they should be focusing on. But what we see is big pharma using patent games to be able to extend their patents so they can charge as much as possible for as long as possible. And, the way that's not really innovation. Taking the same molecule that was invented decades ago and rejiggering it so the strength is a little different or the dosage form is different, and then saying, hey, this is a whole new drug. And then just so they can charge as much as possible for another 16 years. That doesn't really benefit patients. What compounding pharmacies do is we take drugs that have already been FDA approved, and then we change the dosage strength or dosage combination to create a new drug. And then we let and work with prescribers to determine what drug is best for their patients or patient populations, and leave it up to them to then work with us directly. And so we see this as a much more nimble way of bringing a product to market, a pharmaceutical product, whereas the traditional pharmaceutical process, you have to go through a new drug application with the FDA, which takes 10 plus years and hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. Whereas us, it takes tens of thousands of dollars and maybe 6 months to be able to get a new product to market. And so, because compounders can, those R&D costs aren't as significant as big pharma, we can take existing molecules that have been FDA approved and customize them for what the doctor thinks is in the best interest of his or her patients, not what big pharma thinks is in the best interest of patients, which of course we know today, big pharma does not really work in the best interest of patients, especially when it comes to pricing of their medications. As they use an equation that's different than ours, they try to figure out what's the most profit that they can make off a certain patient population. Our equation is what's the least profit that we can make while still being able to run a business. By using that equation, we can get these medicines in the hands of as many patients as possible, whereas big pharma only wants to make as much of a small segment of a patient population.
Got it. And do you face challenges then in terms of, because you mentioned before the patents and big pharma looking to expand those, and does that create a challenge for you in terms of accessing certain chemicals to then make drugs? Or how does that work?
It's a great question. So pharmacy compounding has been around for thousands of years. All drugs, before big pharma existed, all drugs were compounded. You can see, old pictures of druggists and apothecaries using mortars and pestles and, Erlenmeyer flasks and graduated cylinders to make these prescriptions one at a time. So the regulations have been around for hundreds of years. And there are, nothing is more regulated than making drugs that are destined to be injected into humans. And so we have hundreds of regulatory agencies overseeing us, state boards of pharmacies, DEA, FDA, state health and human service organizations. And, and they come in regularly, inspect us, and use very strict rules to make sure that patients are getting access to medications that meet the minimum threshold for safety in this country, which are very high. And so for big pharma, it's a little different. They're mostly there to make mass-produced medications. For compounders, we make small, mid-sized batches and serve smaller patient populations.
When we spoke earlier this week, we were talking about the people who are going to be listening to and watching this podcast. A lot of them are executives running companies. You used the term, which was very interesting. You described CEOs or high-performing people as corporate athletes. What did you mean by that?
We're all playing a game. We're playing the game of business. And nothing is more important than performance. I mean, that's how we're all judged at the end of the day. How well did our company perform? How quickly did we grow our EBITDA, our revenue? If we don't show up to the workplace 100%, the business doesn't perform at 100%. I learned this the hard way, by not being fully optimized to begin with. And as I got access to more and more of these medications, optimized the biomarkers within my blood, I performed better. I felt better. And it's very similar to the way that athletes perform. How do athletes perform at their peak? Many of them take performance-enhancing drugs. There's a reason these substances are banned in sports. They work. And there's a lot of money at stake for athletes because if they don't perform well, they'll get kicked off the team, $1 million contracts are taken away. So there's a very good incentive for them to take these medications. What's the difference with that and a CEO? We are also based on our performance, and we could lose millions of dollars in bonuses or stock options or potentially the company failing if we don't perform to levels we need to. And so why are we afraid? Why should we be afraid to take advantage of these medications? All we're doing is just improving the internal biomarkers, supplementing a chemical that our body doesn't produce in one way or another. Because if if we're missing a certain chemical, we feel off. Why do we feel off? Because a certain chemical process isn't occurring at the rate that it should, and our bodies or organs aren't performing as well as they should. So then we don't perform as well. And a lot of people think that if we just if we work really hard, we're very dedicated, we can perform. We can control our bodies. It's not true. It's not the mind that controls the body. It's the body that controls the mind. And it does it through torturous means called hormones and other chemicals and enzymes. And if we don't have those chemicals, enzymes, and hormones in the right ratios, our bodies are going to not feel well. And of course, these chemicals, they cross the blood-brain barrier. And so if our body doesn't have the chemicals that it needs, our brain doesn't have the chemicals that it needs to perform at peak performance. And so we see a lot of movie stars, people on Wall Street, and, wealthy people of wealth being able to take advantage of these therapies. But, and times have changed. Now that people are becoming more aware and there's a lot more competition out of prescribers that understand how to prescribe these types of medications, we're seeing those costs plummet. And so now anybody can access these medications. If you have one of the highest stress jobs in the entire world, which is the job of the CEO, I think, in order to be responsible for your stakeholders, your shareholders, we should really be focusing on ourselves, improving our own health. And if we do that, then we can show up 100%. We can be more clear, have more focus, be happier. I can't tell you what the difference between a good night's sleep makes to my attitude the very next day. And how having this extra muscle mass helps me perform, helps me, I can go 12, 16-hour days without getting tired. Same way athletes, same reason they take these medications, so they don't get tired. Their stamina continues. Yeah. And that's really, if we are to outcompete our competitors, we should be taking a page out of the playbook of other athletes.
Interesting. And it's a process, right? Like learning your body. Everybody's different. So you described when you got the testosterone and the wonders that did for you. But people shouldn't necessarily sort of stop exploring that. Maybe they get one treatment and maybe they don't feel much of a difference. That doesn't mean you should stop, right? Like you're always learning about your body.
We have thousands of chemicals. All life is a chemical process, chemical reaction. If we are missing these chemicals, some of those chemical reactions don't occur and we get disease states. And so, and we're very lucky today that we live in a time where we can have access to labs that can do diagnostics on us, figure out where our biomarkers are, hundreds of biomarkers for several $100s, or even covered by insurance in many cases. And now a doctor can now look at those results and say, oh my gosh, yeah, we should be putting you on this supplement and this medication, and let's start you there. And then let's bring you back in 3 to 6 months, see how your body's responded, see how your symptomology has responded, and let's reassess. And so, yes, it is a forever process. It's not like we just fix it once and we're done for the rest of our lives. Our bodies degrade over time. And based on our environmental factors, our genetic factors, and what we eat, everything there's so many variables. Yeah. And so finding a prescriber that is familiarized and is an expert in functional medicine or preventive medicine and working with them constantly to get us dialed in so that we can operate at peak performance. Most doctors are not trained in medical school how to do preventative health. They're trained to do sick care. And because a lot of medical schools are sponsored by big pharma, they're taught how to use big pharma's tools. And the insurance-based system. Well, insurance doesn't really cover preventative medicine or quality of life medicine. The cash pay markets do. So the best doctors typically don't accept insurance. They only accept cash. And so it's important to find a good doctor that accepts cash. And to find one, you can go on Google, ChatGPT, find me a functional medicine provider in my area, or if they're using telemedicine, find me the best functional medicine provider. There's also a great website, the Institute for Functional Medicine, that has a provider search where if you want to see a local provider, you just type in your zip code and it'll show you all the providers that have been certified in functional medicine. And these certifications, they're not done within med school. They're done outside of med school. So it's a certain type of doctor that's decided that, I don't want to be doing inpatient care. I want to be making sure that patients don't even come to the hospital, don't really have to get sick in the first place. And those are the doctors that are really on the cutting edge and offering these types of therapies.
I find the doctor I go to see, him or her, what should I expect? Is it blood work, tests?
Yep, absolutely. So one thing, this doctor is going to spend hours with you, not 5 minutes. They're going to sit down and they're going to ask you dozens or hundreds of questions, really figure out what's exactly going on, how you're feeling. How did you feel 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? What are your goals? And then, of course, they're going to do vitals. They're going to take your blood, and they're going to take a lot of blood. This is not your normal, it's not a normal doctor test. They're going to take saliva samples. They're going to take stool samples. They're going to take every possible sample so they can get a full picture of what's going on inside of your body. And now that they have all these data points, they can come back and say, yeah, this is where we can optimize you. And everybody, for a lab result, has a normal range. And that normal range typically makes up 95% of the population. Do you want to be like 95% of the population, or do you want to be that top 5%? And so what that doctor then does is they customize these treatment programs. They give you the exact amount of chemical that your body is needing to bring you up into that top quartile or top 5% of the normal range, where you can really be a superhuman.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples where you feel that your focus on this and on your own health, can you give us some specific examples where you feel that's really helped you perform in your role?
Oh, absolutely. So obviously starting with testosterone, androgens, anabolic therapies are so important. Muscle is the next frontier. It's really what I think is most important health, and it's backed by a lot of science as well. After we lose about 30% of our muscle, we die. Like we can't walk. After we 40, we're dead. That's wasting syndrome. And so the importance of muscle can't be stressed enough in aging and being healthy, as it also supports immune function and metabolic function and glucose control. And so that's the base. I would start there. Get control of your muscle. And then from there are others there. There's, of course, if you have another and a great doctor, Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, speaks about muscle span, the time in life where we have muscle so we can be mobile and enjoy life and be able to pick up our grandchildren and walk and climb and do everything that makes us happy. And then I have another great doctor, Dr. Mohit Kira out of Baylor, that has trademarked the term sex span, the amount of time in life where we can be sexually active, because humans need to be sexually active to be really happy. And then you have, doctors like Peter Attia that talk about health span. It's the amount of time in life where you are healthy. Because you don't want to be, work your butt off, make millions of dollars. By the time you're 60, you can't even move. Right? So being able to be as healthy throughout your time to enjoy those golden years is also very important. And so there's so many areas of treatment. There's IV nutrition. I get an IV of a performance IV with high doses of vitamin C, B complex, glutathione, magnesium, lysine, theanine, all these things that support immune function and performance. And then I also found out one time several years ago that I had heavy metal poisoning. My lead and mercury levels were off the charts because doctors don't test for mercury or lead in your normal primary care provider visit. And so then I got on chelation therapy. I was put on edited disodium as well as DMSA, which are chelating agents and can bind these heavy metals and allow your body to excrete them over time. And so that helped my mitochondrial function, which gave me even more energy and helped me think a lot clearer as well. And then we've got other therapies. So there's sexual wellness therapies where, in order to make yourself and your partner happy, those are very important as well. And for many patients, getting access to, if there are aware, as many patients in our country are, getting access to affordable GLP-1 medications that have been customized for those patients, that's another one. So and then of course dermatological formulations. I have acne. I grew up with acne, and then when I got on testosterone, I got even more acne. as that's what it does. And so formulating acne creams and beauty creams and anti-wrinkle creams, making ourselves not just feel good, but look good as well. That's very important for our self-esteem and happiness. And so integrating all these different areas of treatment and figuring out where I could be optimized, and then working with a qualified practitioner to get me access to these customized therapies has just made my life so much different. And today I'm 41 years old. I feel 100 times better than I did when I was 18. And everybody can do that. The aging process does not have to be cruel. It's actually, the day that you get access to these therapies, like that is one of the luckiest days in our lives, because now we can go to the top 5%. We can go to the same blood levels. We can make ourselves similar to high performance athletes. We can be LeBron James. We can be Kobe Bryant. We can be Michael Jordan. What makes them so special? They're genetically lucky. They had high growth hormone levels to begin with. They had high testosterone levels to begin with. They had the chemicals in their bodies that were necessary for them to be able to perform that level. And so, we can go from normal or suboptimal to truly being optimized. And the first step is finding that qualified provider and getting on these therapies.
Well, you've been very kind of generous and open with the treatments you've used. Just talk us through a day or a week of how do you take care of your body?
It's a great question. So it's a lot. It's a lot of work, but it's easy if you have it built into your routine. And I wasn't always late. I'm always adding new things to my routine. Currently, my routine is it kind of starts at night. I used to not get good sleep throughout my entire life, and so I have to take sleeping medication. I take pregabalin with trazodone, magnesium, phosphatidylserine for cortisol control, theanine to calm me down, as well as ashwagandha as well. And so that stack gets me a good solid 8 hours of deep sleep and REM sleep. And so I'm able to wake up at 5 in the morning feeling refreshed. And now that I'm able to wake up at 5 in the morning instead of 8 or 9 a.m. like I used to, now I have a good sliver of time to take care of myself. And that's when my morning routine starts. So my morning routine consists of first making some mushroom tea, getting it ready to cool down. Then I hit my red light. So I spend 20 minutes sandwiched between two massive red light panels, which help my mitochondrial function, help with immune function and inflammation. After that, I do strength training 3 times a week, where I'm building muscle. So I work at about 30 to 45 minutes working on a particular muscle group. After that, I do some yoga for about 15 minutes. And from there, my steam sauna is ready. Then I spend 20 minutes in my sauna, of course, bringing in 36 ounces of water with electrolytes added to it. After 20 minutes in there, I go straight into the cold plunge. My cold plunge is set at about 45 degrees. Don't start there. I recommend starting at 60 and every week lowering it 1 degree until your body becomes Philly. If you jump in 45 degrees to begin with, you will never do cold plunge ever again. And so that's how by that time, that takes about 2.5 hours for that routine. Now it's 7:30. I have enough time to put on my facial creams, my acne creams, comb my hair, get ready, drink my protein shake after that, and then hit the ground running at 8 a.m. With tons of energy and of course having a good healthy breakfast with good fats, good protein, clean carbohydrates. So I typically eat yogurt, Greek yogurt, mixed with nuts, granola, blueberries, blackberries, and it's like a dessert. But a great source of quality protein and carbohydrates to start your day.
I'm really glad we covered that because we talked about the role that the drugs can play, but clearly they're part of a much bigger routine.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Along with supplements as well. Every morning I take about 20 different supplements to be able to, because I've done blood testing with my provider to show that I am deficient in certain types of chemicals that my body, no matter what I eat, the enzymatic process won't convert those base chemicals into other chemicals. So I have to take alpha lipoic acid, magnesium. Everybody should be taking magnesium. I take some fish oil, omega-3s. I take, of course, a multivitamin, glycine because I'm glycine deficient, and many other supplements. But a lot of people just go to the supplement store and they're like, I think I need that. I think I need that. Well, how do you know?
Yeah.
Like the only way to really find out is to get your blood test and figure out exactly what's going on. And then that provider can say, listen, you need exactly this much of the supplement, not this much, but this much. So don't be taking a handful of pills of vitamin C if you don't even need it. So it's all about working with getting the data. Once you have that data, then you can act.
I've seen it when you came into the studio today. You have an incredible attention to detail. And I think anyone listening can see that that's kind of a key part of what you do. How do you track? Are you kind of at the end of each day looking at vitals, or like how on top of it are you?
Oh, I don't really check my blood pressure as often as I should, but I have pretty good blood pressure. It's really just doing that meeting with my functional medicine provider every 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
And them doing a litany of tests. And of course, comparing those results to last quarter's results.
Got it.
Very similar to how it's done in a company.
Yeah.
And seeing, this has gotten better. This area of your body has gotten worse. Let's focus on this one and get it addressed.
Let's talk a bit more about the shape of the company you now run. You mentioned to me when we spoke previously, you work in partnership with over 40,000 prescribers. How does that work in practice? How do you manage that?
Oh, it takes a lot of complexity. So every single provider has their own practice that's run their own certain way. And it's not us to tell them how they should run their practice. It's real. As a pharmacy provider, we should be working around them. From there, so some providers can require customized workflows, and some providers that are prescribing very similar medications, they can fit into other pools and other workflows. And so it's all about designing a system that can meet the needs of every single type of provider, and then pooling those providers together to make sure that they get consistent quality service and good turnaround times. That's as patients don't want to wait more than a day before they can start their treatments. They're very eager to be able to get medication. The providers are eager to get their patients these medications because if the patient doesn't get medication, then it makes the provider look bad. They don't really think about the pharmacy because the provider is the one that referred that patient to the pharmacy.
I mean, from what we've talked about today, it'd be pretty hard for someone to say healthcare shouldn't be delivered like that. We've talked about all the huge positives of compound pharmacy and getting personalized healthcare plans. But what are the challenges to growth over the next few years? What are the main challenges you face?
It's mostly awareness. As we mentioned earlier, the compounded market only makes up 3% of the total addressable market for drugs in this country. And so, that means about 97% of prescribers aren't utilizing a compounded medication every single time that a medication is dispensed. And then, so I think once you're on these types of medications, once patients have been exposed to medication that is both affordable and may improve their outcomes because they've been personalized, there's very little going back. And so we see once a provider has converted their patients from a commercial medication to a personalized, customized medication, there's very little churn after that. So so what we're doing, and one of the reasons I'm on this podcast, is trying to make others aware that these options are available to us, and they're not relegated to the rich and famous anymore. Pretty much anybody can get access to these therapies for about $100 a month. And that's what I see as inhibiting patients from growing, getting access to medicine, which inhibits us from growing. Also, we've grown up in this country where we think insurance is the solution for everything. And if you think about what is insurance used for? Insurance, is used for catastrophic risk. And you wouldn't use your homeowner's insurance to pay the guy that mows your lawn. You wouldn't use your car insurance to get an oil change or wash your car. That's preventative maintenance. And what in healthcare we use insurance for everything. Where doing something like hormone replacement therapy or doing sexual health or dermatology, that's maintenance. That's kind of maintenance medication. And maintenance medications are very inexpensive, typically less expensive than a copay would cost. And so we're seeing, thanks to Mark Cuban and his Cost Plus Drugs, companies that are exposing, giving transparency to the patient of what these medications actually cost and how utilizing cash pay can actually be much more economical than utilizing insurance.
Isn't it amazing? Most people listening to this will be very comfortable investing tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars into stocks, let's say, real estate. But they probably wouldn't be so comfortable investing $10,000 into perhaps their own health.
Right. Yeah. I mean, nothing is more important than our health, because we could have all the wealth in the world, and if we're not healthy to enjoy it, we are going to be miserable. health is wealth. And so investing, the mentality of working yourself to the bone until you retire, and then that's when life, that's when you can start enjoying life. Typically doesn't work out that way. If we were to invest a little, maintain ourselves, do those oil changes, do those car washes on ourselves, we would be so much healthier and happier, not just, in our 60s once we retire, but today, throughout our entire life. And so that's really what I see as a paradigm shift in healthcare today. Patients and providers spending more time on preventative medicine, on taking care of ourselves. Because once we present to an inpatient system, it's typically too late to fix our bodies. Once disease states have come in, and the chance of them being reversed is much less compared to that disease state not even happening in the first place. And that's really where health comes in. So my advice would be to, and this is a very complicated world, especially if you've never been in functional medicine, you don't know, really how to take care of yourself. The most important thing is to find that qualified provider, someone that is willing to spend time with you, help you understand how your body works, and give you access to all these different therapies that will improve not just your lifespan, but your health span as well.
Yeah. And in terms of finding, we talked about this before, but I think it's really important, finding that really good qualified provider. Is it the fact that that person's prepared to sit there and explain the different results to you and kind of bring you on that journey? Is that the sign that this is someone you kind of want to work with, someone you feel comfortable asking questions to? And
that's definitely one of them. I would approach finding a prescriber the same way you approach hiring an employee. You've got to put them first. You've got to look at their resume. You've got to see what their qualifications are. You've got to see what services that they are an expert in. And then you've got to interview them. And then you ask, how do you develop the question? Just go on ChatGPT. I'm trying to get a functional medicine provider. What are the questions that I should ask? And then ask those questions. And of course, there's so many providers now that are doing functional medicine. To find the best one, it's a little bit of, you've got to do a little bit of research. You've got to go to their websites, got to talk to them, got to see how they practice, what their costs are, and then use that cost benefits analysis to determine which is the best possible provider for that particular patient.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Thank you. What excites you most about the kind of healthcare landscape?
It's competition. That's one thing that's been lacking in the healthcare space for generations. When you have 3 PBMs that control 80% of all drugs in this country, and they control all the specialty pharmacies as well. And now, because of the consumerization of healthcare, we now have market entrants that are coming in that are able to offer a different kind of service and a much better interaction with the patient and offer better outcomes at a fraction's cost. So now, for the first time in our space, we see healthcare costs going down for patients that are utilizing health and wellness services. And the awareness now that we have podcasters such as yourself, Joe Rogan, Andrew Huberman, Peter Tia, people listening and to them, and they are very open about them utilizing these types of therapies themselves to improve their life and their performance. And the patient saying, you know what, I want to do what that person's doing. I want to be like that person. And why not? There is nothing, we couldn't be our heroes. Our heroes, they were just lucky in one way or another. They're in the right place, the right time, with the right chemicals going on in their body, and the right opportunity. It's up to us to create those same conditions if we want to get those same results. And now, because of the internet and the revolution in functional medicine, almost any of us can be lucky enough as they have been.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've mentioned a few times just the cost of that is just decreasing, which is not really the narrative in today's world. Obviously, everyone's talking about inflations and and tariffs, but actually, in this space, it's becoming much more affordable.
Right, and we saw post-pandemic, hundreds of telemedicine companies coming into play, and so any kid that could program and partner with a licensed provider can now get you access. It doesn't have to be that old, antiquated system that patients have to go through. Now it's a much better, more technologically advanced system, and as more and more competition comes, it drives price. That's how capitalism works. So we're very helpful, and we see that things are moving in the right direction. We're very happy to be able to provide, be a small part in this new healthcare system.
And we've talked about how it's really important that executives take care of themselves. Obviously, a lot of companies provide healthcare benefits for employees. Have you seen any companies that are encouraging this type of healthcare really well? Is that something you've seen, or what ideas do you have around how executives could perhaps maybe start with encouraging their upper management?
We don't see many companies doing this. Most companies just refer to their insurance broker, and that's about it. But insurance doesn't cover preventative medicine. So what we've done as a company to address the health of our employees and give them access, let them become high-performance athletes themselves, is give them access to free IV nutrition every week if they want. We have a nurse come in. We'll hook them up, give them the same IV that I get. We also give them access to a sponsor's integrative health functional medicine program where they can partner with a telemedicine prescriber and get all the same tests and results and get them access to the medications. Then we also give them free medicine. We're very lucky to be a compounding pharmacy. So those medicines that functional medicine provider sends us, we offer them to our employees at no cost. But turns out for most employers, the cost of a compounded medication for preventative health is a lot less expensive than a commercial equivalent may be. So these are ways that we see a lot of providers getting their employees access to these types of therapies. And then at the management level, we offer a full concierge medical program. I mean, most executives are getting paid several $100,000, but they're getting this. They're not getting the healthcare needs taken care of. I mean, we found that if we invest $20,000 a year into our executives and give them access to a full-blown, high-level concierge health and wellness program, they perform 10% better.
And what's that worth to the company, right?
Right. And if let's just say that a person is getting paid $300,000 a year, and the program costs $20,000, well, now you've just got a 5% return. It makes sense. It's much better because when that executive feels better, they can work longer hours. They can show up better for their staff. They manage better, and they're really bought in to the company because very few companies are willing to invest in their employees like that. And like I said, there's nothing more important than health, than your employees' health. And so investing in their health, I think as an employer, is the right thing to do.
Fantastic. And finally, what message do you most want executives and leaders to take away from this conversation?
It's first, take care of yourselves so you can take care of others. I mean, we hear the whole thing in airplanes every single time, put the mask on yourself before you put it on others. And I think if we were to take care of ourselves, really take care of our health, get good exercise, eat well, sleep well, manage our stress somehow, and utilize biomarker optimization, we can show up as the best versions of ourselves, and then we can help make others into the best versions of themselves.